Sometimes the cure sounds scarier than the illness. The truth is like infected tonsils, so swollen they touched, constantly choking me. Everyone told me how much it would hurt to take them out, but I didn't know until they were gone that it hurt more to keep them in than to cut out a whole part of me. I remember describing my history with cocaine to Mackenzie for the first time. She asked, "Does it seem like a pattern to you?" I outright denied any pattern. This was just something that had happened a couple of times. I wasn't addicted. I just liked it. But I knew it wasn't good for me. So I quit. I was sober by then. So clearly everything was fine. The thing about sobriety and I is that I hadn't truly seen her in years. I was either drinking, or I was smoking, or I was doing drugs, or I was hypersexual, or I was self-harming, or I was purging, or I was binge eating, or I was starving myself. I was always doing something to fill the void, something to keep my mind off of reality. Even when I was sober, I was only California sober. My weed was medicinal, and mimosas didn't count. When I went sober, I started purging again, one of the many vices I picked up in my teenage years. I purged and starved myself until I had lost 45 pounds and was catching the attention of my clients and family. The sad thing is, when you're already fat, people praise dramatic weight loss. It doesn't matter how you got there. Good job, girlfriend. Keep it up. I remember the day I learned how to vomit voluntarily. I had made a friend the summer before at band camp who was bulimic. She never talked to me about it, but her roommate did. She had heard her purging. She was underweight, and she was beautiful. Intrigued, inspired even, I searched online while in a computer class at school. How to make yourself throw up. Then I spent the hour reading with the full intent of trying it out when I got home. I took a bite from the forbidden fruit, and that knowledge was delicious. I learned different methods, what to do, what not to do. All the information I ever could have needed was at my fingertips at just 14 years old. I went home, ate a sandwich, and practiced. There was such a rush, such relief when it was over. I was shaking like a leaf after, but I felt unbelievably powerful. I had just undone my dinner. I had just freed myself of the guilt of eating. I could do more. I could do better. 16 years I have been a bulimic. I don't remember when I started hating my body. I don't remember when I started considering eating something shameful, something that needed to be undone. But here I am. My weight has varied wildly through the years. I'll refrain from using numbers here to avoid making an already triggering tale worse, but I've gone from getting called a beanpole to being called thick. Nowadays, curves are being bought. Women are praised for having my body type. As I write this, my body is curvy. My ass is wider than Kim K's, and people often talk about it positively. When I was growing up, however, these types of bodies were looked down on. Ultra low-rise jeans and crop tops were all the rage. I grew up with a ferocious appetite for fashion magazines, where I pored over the heroin chic look, the rail-thin frames, the model's bones showing in all the right places. I spent countless hours online dedicated to finding more information, more ways to lose weight. I found whole communities of people like myself, starving teenagers who were obsessed with numbers. We calculated our meals together, posted pictures of them, overestimating our caloric intakes by a landslide, and shaming ourselves and each other for what we had taken in, encouraging each other in ways to make up for our mistakes. We shared red bracelets to identify each other, posted blue butterflies to show our dedication to Anna and Mia, the personification of our disorders. We wrote poems to them, from them. We shared pictures of dangerously thin women in ballet slippers and bathing suits. We told each other better ways to hide our sins and excuses to give our families. We shared meanspo, cruel words intended to trigger each other into skipping dinner. What I'm about to tell you, I'll admit that I am still incredibly ashamed of. At 16, I created a page on Facebook dedicated to Mia and used it to encourage others to starve and purge. Hundreds of sick people used my page as thinspiration. I shared lists of negative calorie foods, calories burned during various exercises, pictures of emaciated women, poems romanticizing my illness. I made friends there who were struggling in all the ways that I struggled, and we drove each other deeper into our struggles, believing that the only way to feel better, to overcome, was to lose inches and pounds. We competed against each other, always comparing our weight, our BMI, our waist sizes. We measured ourselves by the measurements of our bodies. I can only imagine the damage that that page did. I fear that people were pushed further into their mental illness due to my devotion to that safe space, as I called it. I fear that people lost their battles to anorexia or bulimia, in part because of me. I wish I could say that the online presence of my eating disorder died at 16, but it didn't. I found Tumblr, and that God-forsaken place became my stomping grounds. I became popular online with my eating disorder-centered poetry, became famous within a small circle of people who leaned on Tumblr as their safe space. I still find myself going there when I fall back into these behaviors, surrounding myself with people who live in the same secrecy and obsession. A few years ago, I made a new friend, Ashley. Ashley confided in me that she was a bulimic too. She had lost 80 pounds and was finally at my weight, almost exactly. She was my height. She had nearly my same frame. We both were unhappy with our weight, despite our collective losses, and began a weight loss journey together. We were on the keto diet together. We shared our MyFitnessPal accounts with each other, seeing every calorie that the other ate, every pound that we lost, tracking each other as closely as we tracked our own. The competition became fierce. That's the thing about eating disorders. They are inherently competitive. They pin you against others, against society's standards, against yourself. We found ourselves jealous of every pound the other lost, and pushed harder to lose faster than the other. Inevitably, we both started purging again. We would go out for our breadless meals and go to the bathroom after. We would discourage each other from purging, as good friends would. But the truth was, we were not going to be outdone by our friend. We were driven to beat each other, to purge more, to eat less, to lose until we were the thin friend. Neither of us wanted to be the fat friend again. Neither of us wanted to be left behind while the other had their glow up. The undercurrent of this friendship was competition, without a doubt. But there was more boiling beneath the surface than that. We were attracted to each other, and it was painfully obvious. We flirted to the point that our friends were placing bets on when we would get together. The catch? Ashley was straight. Ashley had never dated a woman. She came from a conservative family. She was not ready to admit her feelings for me. We went out for drinks one night and got so intoxicated on margaritas and tequila shots that we ended up in a bathroom stall together, laughing and sloppily applying lipstick to each other. She sat down on top of the toilet, and I sat on her lap. She wrapped her arms around my waist. I wrapped mine around her shoulders. I asked if I could kiss her, and she said yes. We left together in an Uber and couldn't keep our hands off each other. We ended up in her car, entangled, all of our competition set aside for these moments of passion. We went back to my place and cuddled with each other. I was drunk on more than just the alcohol. The next day, she was cold with sobriety and regret. She told me she didn't think we should do that again. I told her I agreed, that our friendship was more important to me, that we would never last as a couple anyway. We were better off as friends. It was just sex. It was no big deal. I didn't mean these things, of course, but I could not let my feelings, my broken heart, show through. I had to remain strong. I had already broken once before over Emma. I could not break again. Our mutual friend chastised me. She told me that I never should have said those things, that I should have told her how I felt, that I should have begged her to accept that her feelings for me were natural, okay, and shared. I should have asked her to give me a chance, should have told her that she shouldn't let her family's opinions keep her from love. But I didn't, and it was too late. I said what I said, shut down any possibility of a relationship with her, and probably left her with more regret than she woke up with. She needed me to say that what we did was okay, but instead, I crushed her. I made something casual out of what was probably a life-altering moment for her. Our friendship gradually dissolved, until one day, she iced me out entirely. I don't blame her. It was toxic for both of us. We might have continued triggering each other's eating disorders forever. But part of me will forever wonder what we could have become if I had just said what I truly felt that morning. Fear of rejection be damned. The competition may have left when Ashley did, but bulimia stayed with me, my constant companion. I remember the day that I told my therapist that I may know what led, in some part, to my eating disorder. When I was growing up, I did not have food security. I frequently went without food at home. More often than not, I had no lunch money and was left either taking the walk of shame to get a single peanut butter and jelly sandwich rather than a tray, letting everyone know that I had no money, or just not eating. All but twice, when the hunger was unbearable, I chose the latter. It wasn't that my parents didn't have money. They actually made enough income that I did not qualify for free or reduced lunches. They just spent that money on meth, alcohol, whatever the flavor of the month was. I stole food from the Family Dollar behind my house. Hormel Completes were my favorite, the easiest to steal, the easiest to prepare for myself. All they required was electricity to run the microwave. We didn't always have that, though. I recall eating ranch dressing straight because there was nothing else to eat. I remember eating a cold can of asparagus because there was no other real food in the house, and there was no electricity. When we had food, I couldn't help myself. I ate and ate, completely out of control. My stepfather would hear the refrigerator opening in the kitchen and scream from the living room, "Get out of the fridge, fat ass!" Over and over, every time, even when I was stick thin, even when I hadn't been in the fridge all day. I would hide food. I would hoard it. I was starving and binge eating long before I knew anything about eating disorders. My neighbor kid's mother would take me out and buy me food every time I came over. They had so much food everywhere. Baskets full of fruit, cabinets and fridge completely full. They didn't just have meals. They had snacks. They had dessert. They had all their utilities on all of the time. Even their animals were well fed. Their girls, my friends, seemed to resent me. Their mother paid special attention to me, taking me in like one of their stray cats and feeding me. She called me Angel every time she spoke to me. She showed me unconditional love. The day I heard of her passing, I was beyond crushed. This woman had been more of a mother to me than my own ever had. She was a nurse, one of the many who inspired me to pursue nursing. After telling my therapist about my childhood struggles with food, she was shocked that I hadn't mentioned it before and said it was clearly the root of my eating disorder. I think I knew this, but I was so ashamed of my childhood that I had a difficult time accepting that any of it formed who I am today. The truth is, all of it formed all of who I am today. A few years ago, I was at a peak of my bulimia. I was purging multiple times a day, every day. I started having tooth pain. Every time I ate, my food tried to come up involuntarily. I constantly felt acid burning in my throat, even when I wasn't purging. I had unbearable heartburn. Then, I started having trouble swallowing. It started with the feeling that my food was getting stuck near my sternum. Then, it was getting stuck in my throat. It culminated with me choking on a smoothie while driving down the road with my child in the back seat. I nearly ran off the road, trying to breathe, to swallow, to throw up, to do anything to move the smoothie out of my throat. I was terrified. I knew that long-term exposure to stomach acid on the esophagus could cause Barrett's esophagus, esophageal cancer, a ton of problems that could never be corrected. My lymph nodes were swollen. My stomach had a gnawing feeling in it every single day, like something was trying to chew its way out. I was in unbelievable pain, too afraid to eat now, and dropping weight faster than I had with bulimia alone. I was working as an aide at the hospital when a nurse pointed out that my eye was twitching and told me that it was probably from an electrolyte imbalance. I felt like she knew, was seeing right through my bullshit. I went to the doctor and had to admit that I was a bulimic, that I was suffering serious consequences because of it. He didn't scold me, as I had feared he would. He told me he was sorry, made sure I was getting therapy, and scheduled me for an EGD and colonoscopy. My anxiety was eating me alive. They found that I had gastritis, esophagitis, IBS, and a hiatal hernia. It wasn't large enough for surgery, but could cause my stomach acid to continue to go up into my esophagus regardless of whether I was purging or not. They put me on medication. I stopped purging, and slowly, the gnawing feeling in my stomach and the choking ceased. I went to the dentist about my aching teeth. I had to get a root canal and a crown. Bulimia had destroyed one of the teeth in my smile. I needed 4 fillings. It was a $2,000 ordeal. More than half my life spent in this eating disorder had finally caught up to me. You'd think that would put this to an end, would wake me up and make me realize that I could not continue on this way. But it didn't. The desperation to lose weight, to become less of myself, still haunts me. Every meal I eat is a battle. One, because it often tries to rise up in my throat without my permission, making the temptation to purge it even more difficult to resist. And 2, because I can mentally calculate the calories in almost everything I eat and know when I've reached the point where it could potentially make me gain. I know when I've reached the limit of my weight loss. I know when I've exceeded it. The calculator in my mind is forever running. And I still hear my stepfather's voice. Get out of the fridge, fat ass. I do EMDR therapy now on weeks when I feel strong enough to face that voice in my head. Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing therapy. My therapist has a light bar that I watch as it scans slowly from left to right. I hold tappers, little plastic triangles that buzz in my hands from left to right. I talk about my trauma, verbally walk back from one memory to another until I get back to the earliest memory, the root of my core beliefs. Mackenzie helps me stay grounded while my brain desperately tries to shut down and dissociate. She tells me I'm here, right now. I'm 31, not 6. She tells me to look at the things around me. She draws me back into the room, present with her. But the flashbacks come when I leave her safe little office. They come at inconvenient times. Most recently, the trigger was a plate at my friend's house. It was the exact same design as the plates we had when I was growing up. Suddenly, I was 8 years old, washing dishes. My stepfather was walking into the kitchen, and he told me I wasn't done. He pulled a plate out of the dish rack. He spat on it. He threw it back into the sink and told me to keep washing. I couldn't start my homework until the dishes were finished. It was already 10 p.m. I turned the cold water off and ran it as hot as it would go, and held my hands in it until my fingernails throbbed from the burning. I did it to cope. That was my first experience self-harming. My stepfather haunts my nightmares. I am in my childhood home, and he is chasing me. I jump out the window, run down the street, and he is chasing me all across my hometown, inhumanly fast. This never happened, of course, but in my dreams, he is more than human. He is a demon, and he is going to kill me. He grows more legs, more arms. I run and run, but it is never fast enough. I wake up crying. I wake myself up screaming. I wake up swinging, knocking the water bottles off of my bedside table, soaking myself, jarring me out of the nightmare. I've been put on Prozocin, an antihypertensive medication that they discovered years ago helped soldiers who came back from the war, eaten alive by their PTSD nightmares. When I took it, I didn't dream, but I woke up so dizzy I couldn't stand for most of the morning. I had to quit taking them. So the nightmares keep coming. There is no medication that completely takes away the flashbacks. So I continue going to therapy. I continue talking about my trauma. I hold a pillow in my lap on Mackenzie's couch and describe my childhood, watch the light bar, until slowly it stops affecting me so deeply. So slowly. Telling this story, my story, is therapy for me. I speak until I reprocess it, until I am desensitized to it to some degree, until I can say that the pain of discussing it is an 8 instead of a 10. I watched the light bar scan to the left. My stepfather threw a hot bowl of chili at me, breaking the bowl. I don't know where my mother was. I watched the light bar scan to the right. My stepfather broke a keyboard over my head. My mother was in bed sleeping. I feel the tapper buzz in my left hand. My stepfather picked me up by my throat, lifted me off the ground, and spat gizzards in my face, screaming at me, all because I had whispered "shut up" under my breath all the way down the hallway from him. My mother was at work. To this day, just hearing the word gizzards triggers flashbacks. I feel the tapper buzz in my right hand. My stepfather threatened to start poisoning my food with laundry detergent, specifically. I was afraid to eat anything he cooked after. I told my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. I was back home within a week. He still cooked dinner. Left. My stepfather grabbed me by my hair and slammed my head into the wall over and over, punching me. He did this because he believed I was lying when I said I hadn't gone into his room and played a game on his computer. My name was in the high scores, a common name, but it had to be me. I screamed that I was telling the truth, but the attack continued on until I no longer could scream. My mother stood in the doorway, watching, saying nothing, doing nothing. Drunk or high, I do not know. Right. My stepfather ran his hand all the way up my thigh while he thought I was asleep. My mother was asleep in the other room. Left. My stepfather told me he had caught me touching myself, which I had never done, and told me he wanted to show me how to do it correctly. My mother was at work. Right. My stepfather showed me porn. It was all over the basement, his basement, where we spent so many hours together. My mother was upstairs. Left. My stepfather told me he wanted to leave my mother for me, that we could run away together. My mother was at work. Right. When I was in the 2nd grade, I told my mother that my stepfather tickled me, and it hurt. She moved us 3 states away in the middle of the night. I was devastated that I didn't get to say goodbye to my best friend, didn't get to gather my things out of my cubby at school. My mother let him move back in with us within the month. I dissociate. Mackenzie brings me back. An hour has gone by. I go home and cry myself to sleep. When I was in the psychiatric facility after my suicide attempt, my social worker called my mother and asked if she was aware of any trauma that I had. She told them that I had seen violence at home, that I had been a witness to him beating her up. I told her no, that I was not just a witness. I was a victim. She acted like she had no idea. I told her about these specific traumas. She told me that they never happened. When I refused to relent, she told me she just didn't remember. She had no idea. I reminded her that she was on drugs, drunk, at work, asleep, in the other room. The day I was starting therapy with Rachel for the first time, fresh out of the hospital, scared of opening up, my mother got a message from my ex-stepsister. She told her that my stepfather had cleaned up his act, found Jesus, gone sober, and wanted to reconnect with her. He wanted to apologize for what he had done to her. Immediately, I told her that if she so much as said hello to him, she would be dead to me. And I meant it. I went to therapy and cried the entire time. Years before this, I heard that he had lost his hand in a fire. I wrote poetry about it. I heard about the fire when you lost your hand, such poetic justice that you burned off the hand that burned me. Now both of us are missing pieces. When I was 17, my friend Brienne's mother asked me to go for a drive with her, just us. On that drive, she asked me if my stepfather had ever hurt me. I told her no, emphatically. She told me not to lie to her, so I told her yes. She asked me if he had ever touched me. I said no. She told me, once again, not to lie to her, so I told her yes. She asked me if I wanted help getting away. I told her no, that I was about to turn 18 and already had a plan. I just had to survive a few more months in that house, and then I would get away on my own terms. I had confided in my best friend, Holly, about what was going on at home. She told her mother. Her mother told me, didn't ask, told me that I was moving in with them immediately. I told her I had to wait just a few more weeks. When I turned 18, I got up in the middle of the night while my parents were asleep and packed everything I owned into my car, a white 91 Chevy Cavalier. My mother woke up and caught me moving out. She asked me what I was doing. What does it look like I'm doing? She begged me not to go. She started crying. I told her that as long as she was in that house, living with him, she was dead to me. She would never see me again. She would never hear from me again. I was cruel beyond words, full of venom, but it had to be said that way, or it would never be said at all. My stepfather was still asleep, practically comatose from all the whiskey he had drunk the night before. At 6 a.m., I moved into Holly's house. My parents showed up later that day. My stepfather was drunk, belligerent, yelling. Holly's stepfather grabbed a shotgun and went out to the porch and told them to leave. I stood in the doorframe watching, saying nothing. They drove away. I never saw my stepfather again. 6 months later, my grandmother called me. I was at college now, had moved on with my life, and had repressed all thoughts of my life before. I did not talk about home, childhood, or where I came from. My grandmother told me that my mother had left my stepfather the weekend that I moved out. She told me that my mother was clean and sober, had moved to a different town, had gotten a new job, new friends, and was divorcing him. She wanted to see me, to talk to me, to have another chance. So I gave her one. I wish I could say that our relationship was all uphill from there, but it was not. It has been a winding, twisting road with just as many outbursts and fights as moments of forgiveness, fun, and love. I have to choose to forgive her every single day. It's in the past, sure, but these experiences are very much still part of my present, and I have to relive her neglect, her allowing me to be abused, her taking him back over and over. It still feels fresh. It doesn't feel like a memory. But I tell her it's over. It's done. We're moving on. Even though the process of moving on is the epic battle of my existence. Even though it will never truly be done for me. I forgive her, and forgive her, and forgive her again. And now, I watch her with my own daughter and see that she is an incredible Grammy to her, loves her without fail, and is helping me give her the childhood that I didn't have, the childhood she could not give me. My mother shows up, sober and aware. My mother holds her, kisses her, and it heals all my boo-boos that went unkissed. She cannot undo what she did, what she didn't do, but she is doing her best with my child. That is all I can ask. As I write this, I wonder who will hear it. Will my coworkers hear it and make work uncomfortable for me? Will I lose my job? Will my family members run across it and wonder why I never told them? Will my friends look at me with pity now? Will a few strangers find it and be filled with sorrow? Or will they hear it and be inspired, given hope that someone like me, someone with my history, can become more than a product of their upbringing, can break the cycle of violence and sexual abuse and become stronger for it, can become a healer, can become a good parent, can share their story and inspire someone else. My hope is for the latter, but I know that some will find this too difficult to digest. Some will be triggered by their own memories, will find themselves taken back to the darkest corners of their own experiences, and find themselves drowning inside them. I want you to know that if that is you, finding yourself drowning in the darkness, I have a promise for you. Diamonds are made under unbelievable pressure and darkness. There is beauty at the end. As one of my favorite songs says, it's always darkest before the dawn.